storytelling to seek out new worlds and interesting characters to boldly go where no show has gone before. Live long and prosper, bitches. Our annual fundraiser marathon. Welcome to 24 Hours of GNT 2016. Hour 8. Time flies when you're having fun.
Is it hour 8?
Thank you, Katie. It is the start of the 8th hour.
I thought it was the start of the 7.
Crap.
No, 6 and 7 went together because we didn't have a break.
Okay.
So we didn't hear Katie's little remark.
Steve's voice from above, from the control room. Yes, we're in hour 8, coming to you live from the Non-Baco Theater here in beautiful South Branson. With me, as always, and right now she's wearing her fringed cowboy jacket and shirt with the rhinestone-studded cowgirl hat. It's Terry Lynn.
I never wear rhinestones. If I'm gonna go Western, I'm gonna go Western. Dusty.
All right. Okay.
So I'm just telling you.
My tuxedo's starting to get runny.
Ew.
And if you weren't here earlier in the show and you don't understand, thankful. And there you heard from the glass enclosed nerve center, its producer, Ceridium.
Blah.
Also joining us is Jesfa.
How you doing?
Kajiro.
Hey.
Steve.
Hello.
Ross.
Ew.
Okay.
We have guests.
And we have
Some
guests.
say all.
But that's what is that? What is that? Shrek for hello?
And I'm very, very happy to introduce. We're so happy to have them with us. Just
Shanna.
adore them. What?
You forgot Shanna.
Hold on.
Okay. But she's with us. I want to make sure.
I understand.
Okay.
I heard everything.
Shut up.
Yeah.
We also have with us from Women at Warp. We are so happy to have them with us. We have Sue.
Hi.
Hi. We have, if you're a longtime listener to the show, you know I absolutely love this person, Jara.
Hello.
Hi, Jara. You gonna sing Lady Marmalade for us later?
Say no. You don't have to. It's okay. We're not asking you to sing.
I don't think she heard me.
I heard you.
Oh, shit. And, of course, from Semantic Shenanigans, she is... Oh, there's so much I could say, because we go back. It's Shanna.
Hello. I wear lots of rhinestones and never in a Western context.
True.
There's my lady.
Nice.
That's true, baby girl.
Nice.
Excellent.
That's true, baby girl.
Right on, Daddy-o.
Hey.
All right,
I'm gonna
we're
turn
doing
it
our own
over.
show now.
We're gonna turn it over to Semantic Shenanigans. Jenna and Janet, it's all yours. Go for it, girls.
And Women at Warp,
Wait.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, we wanted to kind of change the direction a bit of the show, and we're going to have kind of an interesting discussion, and we hope you stick around for it. So, first, the lovely ladies at Women at Warp, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Sure. So we started our podcast just over a year ago, with some notable exceptions, some of whom are in this recording session. The Star Trek podcast sphere still tends to be pretty male dominated, so we decided let's make a podcast and we'll have women hosts and guests, and we will talk about Star Trek. And so that's what we've generally been doing. We talk about the on-camera representations, the behind the scenes, and specific episodes, specific characters, general themes, basically anything that is interesting about Star Trek.
Fantastic. And that dovetails really nicely with what we wanted to talk about, because when Shannon and I were thinking about doing a segment for 24 Hours of GNT, what we wanted to talk about was the Bechdel Test. And so for those who don't know what the Bechdel Test is, I have a little history. It goes back 31 years, folks. I'm sure that Alison Bechdel, when she wrote it's just a comic strip called Dykes to Watch Out For. I'm sure when she created this scene, she had no idea that it was going to continue and it was going to be important 3 decades later. And basically, it's a conversation between two women. And one of them says, do you want to go to the movies? And the other one says, I have 3 criteria for movies that I want to see. And here are the 3 criteria. Number 1, the film must have at least 2 female characters who have names. Number 2, they must have a conversation with each other. And number 3, that conversation has to be about something other than a man. Now, this has spawned the Bechdel Test website, which has a few thousand movies on it, where people go in and they look at films and they decide, does it pass or does it not? And I'll tell you right now, it's a very low bar. So, Shanna, I know you did some research about this, so you want to talk about that?
Oh, I did a crap ton of research. Are you kidding me?
And it really was crap ton.
Stop it, you liked it.
Metric or imperial?
Huh? What
Metric or imperial crap ton?
Imperial.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, as Janet said, it does go back to 1985 to a comic strip, and part of my research was I listened to an interview with Alison Bechdel herself, and she talks a little bit about the creation of that comic strip and the criteria, and basically it was something that happened when she and a friend were going to the movies one night, and it was just something that the friend kind of offhandedly said. So she woke up one morning and said, hey, let's make a Bechdel test. She's actually quite sheepish about the whole thing and surprised that it carried on as much as it did. One thing about it too, with the whole thing, well, I don't know, maybe should I save some of this for later or should I talk about the website?
Whatever you like.
Okay, so one of the concerns about the website is that, it's populated by some very well-meaning moviegoers, movie fans who want to promote women's representation in film, but comes in there is that the commenters on the site, they kind of grasp at straws, any single line to legitimize a film for it to pass the Bechdel test. So actually, it's really not hard to pass. And then what this means is that despite these good intentions, it creates kind of low one-dimensional standards for women's representation. And it's kind of, well, it's sort of loosely what we would call in academia, it's quantitative research. We've counted the number of times a thing has happened in a film. But what that doesn't tell us is certain other nuances that go into the representation of women in film. So by limiting it to women talking to each other and about something that isn't a man, we're not talking about the complexities, like what are they discussing? When and where do they discuss it? How do they phrase it? How do they perform it? And are their words acknowledged, praised, or dismissed by other characters? And do their words catch on with the audience?
Because the bottom line is that 2 female characters in a film could be slaves, and if they both have names and they talk to each other about the quality of their shackles, the film passes the Bechdel test.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that you rightfully pointed out it is a super low bar, and so it's not necessarily a test of how good something is for women, but when I'm introducing it to people, I ask them to think about, like, if we look at Star Trek, it's at least I have never managed to find a single episode that would fail a reverse version of this test. So if you tried to find an episode that does not have 2 men talking to each other about something other than a woman, you cannot find that episode. If someone does, let me know. But So that's one way of looking at it, is just like, why does like almost everything we watch have men talking to each other about things other than relationships with women, but not women talking about the things that we actually talk about in life other than relationships with men. So yeah, it's I think it's more to say, you know, if this is failing on a regular basis, then there's a problem with the media.
And I think that's the best use. I'm sorry. I think that's the best use of the Bechdel test, because when you try and do it so piecemeal and like this movie passes so it's good and this movie fails so it's bad, that's not how this metric works, right? Because some really terrible and like bad for women movies pass and some wonderful movies fail just because of how the script is structured. But when you take this test and you apply it to like the last 10 years of film as a whole, and you look at the patterns and see that more than half of all of the movies made still fail, that shows you that this really low bar that is truly a quantitative rather than a qualitative measurement can't be met. That shows us that we have an overarching problem with just even the number of women in film, let alone how well they're represented.
So
definitely.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
but it sounds like you're saying that there's still a long way for us that we have to go. We still have to go a long way in order to not rectify, but to make things just better.
Well, I mean, we're talking about, you know, most films are, what are they, 90 minutes long, 120 minutes long, maybe even longer. And if they can't even spare 1 minute for a conversation like this, and like I said, this is a horribly low bar. It's tiny, tiny low bar, and they can't even hop over it, then that's just nuts. Now, I one of the reasons why Trek passes the reverse Bechdel test easily is partly because of a dominance of men in most of the series. You know, the men as regular characters. I mean, you've got like 5 regular male characters in TOS alone, and the really 3 women who are seen the most, you know, although there are guest stars and whatnot, but the women who are seen the most, except for Rand and Uhura, they don't work in the same area. And then even Rand and Uhura, even if they're standing 2 feet from each other, they often aren't talking to each other.
Well, even when you get to Voyager, this is the part that like grinds my gears. You've got the captain.
I'm sorry, I just heard Peter Griffin.
Yeah, you've got the captain and the chief engineer who are both women, right? And the majority of problems that you face on any of these starships in any of these shows, those are the 2 characters who are going to be talking to each other about the problem that's happening on the ship. And yet Star Trek Voyager only passes about 80% of the time.
87.5, which
80. Okay, so it is a little bit more.
Yeah,
but still, it should pass every single time.
It should. I mean, so I ran the Bechdel test on every episode of Star Trek. I didn't like hand watch them all. I went through transcripts and I had some volunteers. But if anyone is interested, they're on my blog, trekkiefeminist.tumblr.com. And for me, the surprising one was Enterprise, because it actually dropped below Next Generation and only 39% of the episodes passed. And that's because Hoshi and T'Pol like never talk to each other. So it was kind of disappointing.
God, you know, I didn't even realize that, but you're right. I mean, Enterprise happens to be like one of my, it's my second favorite series. And now I'm kind of disappointed in it because I look back on it and go, oh, you know, I always saw them as independent, but I still see them as, you know, as great female characters. I don't want people to, it goes back to that, my opinion on the qualitative point of it is I still see them as great female characters. I would like to have seen more interaction between the 2 of them in a professional setting. I don't know, you know, but then again, I think they underused Hoshi anyway.
Those numbers could have gone up dramatically if they just had a gender balanced crew.
True.
Yes.
If you have 8 main characters, how come only 2 of them are women?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's opportunity here, and well, or rather, there's a lack of opportunity. If you don't have a lot of female characters, they just plain aren't. The odds are that they're not going to interact with each other that much, because series television, there's limitations here. You got 42 minutes or whatever it is to fill, and everybody's got to get a little bit of screen time because of their contracts, and so and we have guest stars and we have action and pew pew and whatnot, and that's going to take up time.
Doesn't help that both of those series criminally underserved a lot of their characters.
God.
True.
They said a mouthful there.
I fear that it's not going to get better with Discovery. Some of the roles that they have announced, most of the roles seem to be male. Although it seems like they're going to be putting more women in higher in the food chain, so to speak. But I do believe they've cast more men than females so far.
That kills me too, because and I think it was Sue who mentioned this, and I'm sorry if I got the wrong person, but where you were talking about just the overall representation of women in film. I mean, the arresting officer can be female, the attending physician can be female, the letter carrier can be female. We don't, it's not just the teacher who can be female; it could be the construction worker, and yes, not all of these roles have to be female, but if casting directors see more women in these roles, even if these roles don't have names, if they have at least one speaking part, then women are going to start to have more opportunities just in general in the business. And that means that as they start to move up the film food chain, they'll start to be thought of as, oh yeah, we should bring this lovely actress Linda Parkett in and have her do, et cetera, et cetera.
But the sad thing that happens a lot of times in movies is that they will put a female an actress into a part that isn't really defined as a gender one for what gender it is. It's really irrelevant to the story, but they'll put them in for the sole purpose of being, okay, we're putting a woman in here and now she's eye candy. And that's kind of a sad thing that they do, because when they do consider making those substitutions, it's not because we're just going to be gender blind for the part. No, or we're going to put somebody in here and now they can leer at her, or they can make a response to her. And that's usually what happens. And that's kind of a sad statement on how casting directors work too.
Well, yeah, you throw the woman in there so that it's not just a sausage fest too.
Well, yeah. And that's the problem though, is that you talk about putting actresses into these parts, but unfortunately, writers and directors and everything don't look at it as a gender blind part. They look at it as an opportunity to be exploitive.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that, and this occurs in video games and other forms of media too, but the default is considered to be a white man. And then it's like, there's this sort of bizarre idea that you need a reason to make the character a woman or a person of color or an LGBTQ person. And that, once we've checked those boxes, we can go back to casting white men. There's actually a quote from Rick Berman in the 50-Year Mission where he's talking about Voyager, and he says, "It had been a while since we had a young, attractive white guy on the show. It just turned out that most of the characters were either alien or black in the previous show, and here we had a woman in the major role." So it's like, thank goodness we got to go back to casting young, attractive white guys.
Oh God,
man.
yeah, because they need opportunities so badly.
Yeah. So it's just like, that's the default, and there's
unless specified otherwise, they're looking for white men.
Yeah.
That's a sad state.
It is a sad state. And it's not, but again, I think another thing we also pointed out, it's not just for gender, it's also for people of color. And
this is very affirmative action-esque.
What is?
The whole, we have to fill a quota, and that's why we have to have these characters.
I don't know.
I think that's how they're sort of I don't know. It's more like a tokenizing thing. They're not seeing it as like we're trying to fix the state of media. They're saying, what is this that we can do to make ourselves look diverse? And then we can go back to casting the stories, like the roles that we know from the identities that we know, because mostly we're white guys behind the scenes. And that instead of just being like, how do we represent a society that's similar to the society we live in every day.
That's interesting.
There is this the idea of affirmative action, like, it makes a lot of people really angry. But, like, you know what? In the short term, to get to a place where it doesn't matter anymore, yeah, maybe occasionally we do need a checklist until it becomes normalized. That's the thing. In order to get it to that point, you have to work for it. So yeah, maybe you do need to go out and specifically say you want to fill this role with a person of color or a woman of color, until you get to a point where minority groups have the same number of opportunities as white men, which they do not, because there has to be a push. You have to make the actual effort to get to the space where there is equity.
Okay, when it comes to what we see is, I'm going to use the term regular, and I don't want to use that term, but it's the only thing my brain is working on right now. Regular corporate employment, whether it be an auto manufacturer or a non-entertainment company. Yes, I think that is exactly the case. Is there, and I don't know what the answer to this, is there an argument to have something along those lines in the entertainment industry, something along the lines of a more qualitative Bechdel test that we should be asking entertainment industries to adhere to? Or do they have the right to service the markets that they have been catering to in perpetuity, meaning the typical white male age 14 to 24?
Well, I think that part of it is that they're discovering that they can actually also make money by appealing to a broader audience than that white male 18 to 24. And I mean, Star Wars, Ghostbusters, there were a lot of examples of companies trying a bit harder on the diversity front and finding like, hey, it didn't actually kill us. And Star Wars was an example where they actually had with The Force Awakens people behind the scenes consulting to make sure that like the extras in the background were roughly 50% men and women, and you're seeing more racial diversity coming out in Rogue One. And I think that that is an example that Star Trek needs to follow, to realize that if you put more diverse people in your show, it doesn't necessarily follow that young white men won't watch it. Maybe a handful of them.
Well,
they're also starting to realize, I think, that women have a lot of buying power.
Aha, there we go.
Which, like, when Star Trek originally aired in the 60s may not have been as true, right? But now we do. There's an entire makeup line that is, of course, mostly marketed towards women, based on Star Trek, that was one of the major sponsors of the biggest Star Trek convention of the year. We have Her Universe, which was recently just acquired this week by Hot Topic.
Yep.
So it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And
congratulations.
Like, geek things are actually being made for women. I don't have to go and buy a men's t-shirt and alter it anymore. I can buy something that actually fits me.
Tell me about it, right?
Right?
Well, you're a very special case, Terry.
Oh, no, I do understand that, but I do have a thing.
But when they start marketing the merchandise towards us, that's really when you see that they realize that, like, okay, so there are women in our audience,
and we do have buying power. And wouldn't we say the same? And couldn't we say the same about other minorities as well, people of color? Saying, why isn't this? I mean, I look at it, and I know we all do in this room. There isn't a person in this room that doesn't have that same feeling, which is we all know the market is bigger than what's being catered to, and it's kind of stymieing when we look back on it and go, why aren't they going? Is it the fear that the market won't respond?
Well, they want sure winners, or close to sure winner as possible. Part of that is Sarbanes-Oxley, that they have to show that they're being responsible with shareholder money. But it's also just plain old corporate fear, I think. Corporate fear of change, corporate fear of failing. We're not having a good year unless we're having a fantastic year, and that's which is unrealistic. That's not sustainable. Shanna, you took one one for the team. You want to talk about that?
Oh God, I took one for the team so hard.
and I love you so for it. Thank you.
So, against my better judgment, against anything that I hold near and dear, upon hearing that 50 Shades of Grey passes the Bechdel test, I had to watch that mess just so that way I could comment on it, because I don't believe in commenting on something that I haven't seen. I did read the book sometime back, and I did feel compelled to see the film because we are talking about film. Huh?
Why?
He
just told you.
No, why did you read the book sometime back?
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
So, one of my mentors at Eastern Michigan University, and I'm not going to tell you who he is because it would probably embarrass him, but he read the book probably because he lost a bet with his daughter or something. I don't even really remember, but not to be outdone, I had to read it too. And it really was as terrible as he said.
Yeah.
Okay. So you then forced yourself to watch the film.
Right, because, with adaptations, things get changed, and so it wasn't necessarily a sure bet that it was going to be exactly like the book. I mean, I found it to be a pretty faithful adaptation, but surprisingly, it lost a little bit of its creepy factor just because you weren't directly inside the main character's head. And so you only had things like facial expressions and dialogue to convey the fact that she never really lost her fear and disgust of what Christian Grey wanted to do to her.
So that one passes. That one passes. But Star Trek Beyond does not.
Star Trek Beyond did not, and I also watched Star Trek Beyond last night too, because I knew I wanted to be kind of talking about these in conversation with each other. So 50 Shades of Grey is 50 Shades of Problematic. The BDSM community has renounced it because basically what you have there is an abusive relationship that's couched as BDSM.
And we all know that it really is a representation of an unhealthy relationship as opposed to a healthy BDSM relationship.
And an unsafe one as well.
Correct.
Exactly. And, I'm going to be blogging about this sometime this week, and I'll have links to all kinds of resources and stuff so you can kind of see the thing that I'm talking about. But by comparison, Star Trek Beyond, which fails the Bechdel test, is an example of why I feel like the Bechdel test, failing it, should not undermine what the film gets right. As a researcher, I take a qualitative and ecological approach, which is why at the top of the show, I was saying things about okay, well, so the women aren't talking to each other, and maybe it is about a man, but we need to look a little bit deeper than just counting occurrences. So the things that I see there are Uhura being a competent, trained officer who does her job without even thinking about it. When down to separate the saucer section so they can try to get away, and she figures out that he's in trouble, she doesn't think twice about it. She goes down there, she helps, she gets the job done. And when Krall asks her, why did you risk your life, she says, Captain Kirk would have done it for me. And that tells me that there is a situation of equality there.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
And trust.
Yeah.
And trust. And later on, too, when she's talking to Krall and she sees him for the first time trying to suck the life out of her crewmates, Sulu's holding her back. I mean, she's crying. She's obviously upset, but you can tell that she's also very angry. If Sulu loses his grip on her, she's going to give Krall a good old-fashioned curb stomping if she can. Usually when you watch movies, it's the woman going, no, don't, he'll kill you, don't, So, and it was totally the opposite way around.
Okay.
Curb stomping is
And so what was it about it? And please remind me, ladies, what the hell happened? Why doesn't this film, what was it that triggered the failure on the Bechdel test?
Because the
separation.
Yeah, the women just never really talked to each other in this film. That was it. But that says nothing.
Doesn't Uhura speak to Crabhead Girl?
Yeah, she talks to the alien girl that gets killed.
Does that character? And that character has a name.
Yeah, Syl. I can't think of it though.
It's Syl.
So it should pass.
What did they?
Yeah.
What did she say?
I
to
think
her,
all
though?
They were talking
yelled-
about escaping.
No, I don't think that they
No.
talked to each
No.
other about it. It's more that
I thought it was the whatever he was after that was in her head.
They were
You
in
know-
the same scene together, but they never conversed together privately.
They didn't.
They
Okay.
didn't address each other.
And I
I
think if
definitely
there
thought they
was,
did.
it was.
I did
please,
too.
I want to
No.
say that if there was a discussion, if there was a line, it wasn't a counteracted line. It was a line of "Don't do it, don't do
So
it."
that's not a conversation. It's
and
only
that
one
isn't a
half of it.
conversation. That's correct.
Just so I can be clear about it too, no matter what happens in the entire movie, all it takes is just one small interaction between two female named characters that is not about a man to make the test pass, right?
You
Exactly.
can
one
pass
line-
in 5 seconds.
Okay,
You-
but I
one
mean, they can
statement
have
and
a
a
dozen.
statement that is responded to. Hi,
So
how
they can
are
have
you?
a dozen
I'm great.
conversations about
Yep.
men and everything like that, but as long as they have one conversation that does not involve that, then it does pass the test.
Correct.
That is a low bar, and it's amazing that things don't pass.
But here's the thing, though. Like, if we're talking about Star Trek Beyond, I don't see that rewriting it so that there's a conversation between Uhura and Syl is really going to improve the movie
Couldn't
all
agree
that
more.
much.
And that's true. That's exactly right.
It's not, so
Because
again,
on the other
it's-
end of the spectrum for Star Trek Beyond is you have Jayla, who's a kick-ass character, strong, and is actually the savior in a lot of ways, but because she didn't talk to somebody.
Well,
You know what I mean?
there were no other female characters around her. They were all men.
But that's what I'm saying.
Right.
is-
Yeah,
And that's
so-
But there's two right there, two of the main characters in that movie.
But that's why I was saying at the beginning that it's kind of a difficult test to apply to
Yeah.
just one film.
Right.
And
Yeah,
you need to take
yeah.
it as a whole across the board.
Yeah,
That's
so
a good
like
point.
talking about it being a low bar, my favorite two Star Trek, well, there are a few Star Trek movies that pass, but two of them pass for really hilarious reasons. One of them is Star Trek 2009. Does anyone remember the scene which makes it pass that test?
It's Gala and Uhura.
Yeah, it's
About the
Galen and
radio,
Uhura
about
talking
when
while
she comes
Kirk's
into the-
hiding and
Yeah, while he's
watching
hiding.
Uhura get changed.
But she's
Wait,
talking
wait,
about
what?
the radio.
So they're in their
signal.
skivvies, and it passes.
Oh,
Yeah,
Are you,
They're talking
A very
are you
fan
kidding me?
servicey scene.
Kirk's been fooling around with the Orion.
He's under the bed.
Hiding while Uhura and the Orion are
The
talking
one
about
scene
the
that
Romulan
just made me
signal.
want to throw things at the screen.
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
The other one is Star Trek Insurrection, which is the conversation about your boobs starting to firm up between Crusher and Troy.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
man! Yes, it's like that. That this is how
Yeah.
low a bar this is, and how
Which is-
unrelated it is to feminism.
So yeah, if you look at it, and I understand what you're saying about taking it all like in the grand scheme of all TV or all film, but when you're looking at an individual film, I feel like it's mostly useless.
I think
Yeah.
that it is a useful introductory media literacy tool. Like, I think for people who have never really thought about media other than to sit there and kind of passively enjoy it, I think it's a cool thing that people can start to pay attention to that's pretty simple and can start to make them aware of some of the patterns. I think it can be good to introduce people.
Especially when
Unfortunate-
you introduce them and say, look at how low a bar this is. Look at all the things that don't pass it. It's kind of an eye-opener in that way.
And, I agree in the context of a classroom, but unfortunately we have a population out there who know about the tests, but are taking it as an end-all be-all of what's good and decent in the world.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
a bit extreme when you do that.
I mean, I think that I've seen a lot of people propose adaptations based on it. And the one thing that I want to bring up is the Mako Mori test in relation to Beyond, because I think that, people start to be like, this is such a low bar. What we should look at instead is this character in Pacific Rim. And you can pass the test in this case if the movie has at least one woman who gets her own narrative arc that is not about supporting a man's story. So it's still minimally indicative, but it means that you have a character like Jayla who has her own arc through the course of the movie and is pretty awesome, and that is also significant even though she wasn't interacting with a lot of women because she also wasn't propping up men.
Let me ask you a question, because one of my all-time favorite characters through any genre is Ripley, Sigourney Weaver. How would you classify her in the original Alien?
Oh man. Well, I haven't gone back to see if it passes the Bechdel test.
I'm
But
trying to think if she talked to Veronica Cartwright. I think the only time she did was when I know she yelled at her to get it together. That it's kind of when a bunch of other people had died, and Ripley's in charge now. She's like,
I mean,
taking
it certainly passes the Mako Mori test.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
It certainly passes the sexy lamp test.
What is the sexy lamp test?
Can you explain
Sexy lamp test?
If a woman can be replaced with a sexy lamp and have it not significantly affect the story, it fails the sexy lamp test.
Jesus.
That's a real
So
thing.
you're talking about the lamp from Christmas Story.
Essentially, that's what I think of when I think of sexy lamp.
Okay.
Because
So
Ripley
apparently
was
Ripley and Lambert discussed their escape plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it does pass.
And they also because they also talk throughout, like at the table and stuff. So yeah, they have several and not the only conversations about men are, like where's Kane or where's this one, or you know what I mean, because they're trying to keep everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the Mori test?
The Mako Mori test, she would definitely pass. It's a woman who has a narrative arc that's independent of a man. It's a lot harder to evaluate. Like, I tried it with the Star Trek movies, and some of them I'm like, I guess maybe. Like, is Gillian Taylor's arc not supporting a man's arc? I don't know. So it's a lot harder to make clear calls on it.
See
but
that? That's a hard thing, because I wouldn't say so, because her arc actually is with the whales.
It's funny because like a lot of the older like 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they used to make women's pictures, and they would have they would often have a female lead, and most of these were romances, and a lot of them, or I wouldn't say a lot, but there's certainly a percentage of them that pass the Bechdel test, because like a woman will be talking to her daughter and getting her daughter ready for school or something like that. And so they pass, but the narrative arc is all about basically serving a man. It's just there happens to be one or two little conversations. Gone with the Wind passes, for example, because Scarlett and Prissy talk about delivering Melanie's baby, and this is when Scarlett slaps her, and Prissy yells, "I don't know nothing about birth and no babies." And even though the baby turns out to be a boy, they're really not talking about a man. But what is Scarlett doing? Everything is about a guy.
Is it? I don't know, but if you take something from the 30s and 40s, everything was so different then to begin with. Now, if you made a movie now about the 30s or 40s, it's going to be different.
There's also, it's not really fair to judge using our standards versus theirs. This is 80 years later, certainly.
I just have the thought, and I apologize if this offends anybody in here, but shouldn't every lesbian fantasy novel pass the Bechdel test? Because nobody in that is talking about a man.
And I would say that they kind of shouldn't, because if your only drive is sexual, that's sort of, that's also kind of the sexy lamp thing, isn't it?
I mean, again, it goes to the quality of the interaction and not the interaction itself.
Right.
I would say that
talking about a man in a sexual way. It's just talking about a man. Hey, did you see Joe? Yeah, he's over there. Like, that's a fail.
I mean, I would say that this is a problem derived from, having a test that came out of a comic strip. And I mean, the comic strip is
that was never intended to be a media tool.
Yeah, and exactly. In the actual comic, it's two lesbian women who have just been to a movie, and they're disappointed that there's not stuff out there for them. So yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, it's debatable whether you should apply this beyond movies or how much you should apply it to movies, as we've discussed. But I think that under the sentiment of the original comic, a lesbian romance novel would pass, because the whole idea is just that media is not catering to women who are not interested in, like, primarily in straight relationships. Like, there's a stereotype that this is all women care about, is they only want to talk about men with other women.
All right, hold on, because I'm really confused by something.
And what was the title of that comic again?
Dykes to Watch Out For.
Thank you.
That's the
I'm really
title of the
confused by
comic
something
strip.
now.
Okay.
So you said, by saying if their conversation was, "Hey, is Joe over there?" Okay, so let's say I write a film, okay? And I've got 2 female soldiers, and they're medics, and they're talking about the patient who's a male.
Mm-hmm.
Does that fail it?
Yes.
That's bullshit, though, because that's their job as medics.
Well, that's kind of what we're talking about. Is that
But the
this
patient could be a woman, like that. So why didn't they cast more? Like, why weren't there more women in this general cast? So it's meant to. I think it works even if you consider that they're talking about professional scenarios, because, like Sue was saying, if you had this number of people in the cast, why weren't they a like slightly better proportion to be more women?
Well, I can tell you that my division had 15,000 soldiers in it, and only 500 were women. So the odds of actually having a woman medic working on you were pretty small.
Yeah, and admittedly, that is an issue, and it's part of the reason why we're discussing that. While the Bechdel test is this baseline, and it really is just this odd baseline that came out of this comment, it isn't necessarily the best tool for us to use as an approval or disapproval of any film or media outlet.
Yeah, any individual film, as we keep saying, it's
Right.
not for individual film analysis.
It seems to me, you know, it's awfully absolute, but what it does do is it makes awareness. So that's the grain of salt you take it with.
Because I'm thinking of like MASH.
Yeah,
If Hot Lips and another nurse are talking about a patient, even today, they're working on an infantry guy or something like that. Even today, there's only one woman who's passed the infantry.
Right.
Right.
But they could also talk about lunch, and then
during surgery.
Here's the other
but
thing.
in the movie somewhere.
Any
They
other
talk
time.
about a lot of weird things during surgery on MASH.
Well, yeah.
No, if you've ever been in surgery, and I can tell you, I've experienced sitting in a surgical room many, many times, the conversations that happen in a surgical room are not unlike what you see on MASH.
No, I know. Yeah, because
I
was the public affairs officer for a
Or
hospital.
on this show.
Using it to the other extent, using MASH as that effort, there's a plenty of great conversations between Hot Lips and her nurses that don't revolve around men.
Yeah.
Well, even if it was during surgery on a male patient, there could be, hey, this instrument isn't working, and they could talk about how to fix that without talking about the patient.
It would
then it passes.
Well, but isn't the criteria not that if it has a conversation about a male, it fails, just that it has to have a conversation that doesn't involve a male?
Correct.
Exactly. It's not even a percentage thing. So yeah, you pass in 5 seconds.
If they talk about
"Hi, Sue."
anything else.
If I say hi, Sue, and you say hi, Janet, we pass.
So
Robert Ray's asked, are you guys referring to the movie or the show in regards to MASH?
I was thinking of the movie, but that's me.
I was thinking of the show, but
Me
that's
too.
Okay.
I think you can kind of consider it either way, because really the female character is Hot Lips, although in later seasons in the show they did have Nurse Kelly. But she's really not a big character.
But
they don't really converse
her and Nurse
that
Kelly interact a lot. Nurse Kelly
So-
will come up and say, I've ordered the 3 more pints of blood, and Hot Lips will say thank you.
passes.
And it passes.
Yeah.
That's how low a bar this is, and that's how ridiculous the bar this is.
Well, again,
And
it
a
should be
lot
looked
of-
at as a guideline, not
And
as
a lot of
absolute.
fails happen because there just aren't that many women, as we talked about before. And I just want to point out that there's the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media has said one of the best things that film writers and directors can do just to increase the percentage is when there is a scene with a crowd, you specify in your script or in your notes, a crowd gathers, 50% of whom are women. And just when there are more women present, you're more likely to have 2 women around who talk about something other than a man.
I think then that shows like Arrow and Supergirl are doing well on that, because there's a lot of females in both those shows, and the way they're dealing with things.
I think that though the topic of the conversation really is about individual film, but
Well, I was going to say, because Arrow at one point had more female characters than male.
Look, the more opportunities for actresses, the better, just in general. Just to continually mix things up and not just make everything a parade of Ken dolls. And
that's something positive that the superhero movies are doing.
Yes, absolutely. It is giving roles and opportunities, although Black Widow still doesn't have a film, right?
They're writing the script.
Thank you.
But you just had Jessica Jones, a 13-episode series.
Yeah, we got one.
Okay. Well, there's also Supergirl. There's also Black Arrow may as well have been Black Canary and Arrow because she was in it as much as him.
You've got Wonder Woman coming out next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
and Winter Soldier should have been Captain America and Black Widow because they had equal screen time.
Yeah, and we're also seeing in the comic source material that I think partly from the pressures put on Hollywood that the comics are also broadening their diversity on a lot of major titles have seen characters change genders and characters of color take over major roles like Spider-Man, and I think that's really positive.
And here's
go
ahead,
Terry.
No, thank you. Is I believe a huge reason for that is because these companies have done their market research and have determined and have verified the enormous uptick in women and people of color being the purchasers of the comic books now. So they're
Ms.
actually
Marvel
starting
is
to
one of my
cater.
favorite titles.
Well, they're starting to cater and not necessarily cater, but open up those wider doors to a broader market. So yes, they decided to, they're gender swapping certain roles, or they're bringing in new characters that I, as a relatively new comic book buyer, are probably going to be more interested in purchasing because it's going to be something that interests me, as it would be if it were, I would assume, as a person of color. I am not a person of color, so I don't know. I can only assume, but I would think that, blacks and others, East Indian, it doesn't matter, would be more interested in seeing somebody who looks like them as a main character of a comic book. So there's a market reason for that divergence. Now, the CW has an unusual market. Let's face it. It's not the same market.
Well, that's true.
As the other networks. And they are truly a niche market. Not everybody watches the CW, but the CW has a lock, stock, hold on the market that it has. And that's going to be a far heavier female market than male.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think it actually it shows that yes, we're progressing, and yes, we still have quite a few leaps to make before we're there, but we are getting there. And that's not something to knock because we aren't there yet.
I think it's interesting too that the CW has this demographic that they consider, that they think is mostly women, and yet they have more sci-fi, superhero, fantasy, supernatural shows than the Sci-Fi Channel does.
There you
That's
go.
a whole
True.
There you go.
Well, we've talked
isn't
about
it?
that it's so funny that the Sci-Fi Channel decided to go to reality quote shows like Ghost Mines and shit just as the superhero thing was taking off, and now the CW is your go-to network every night of the week except Friday. They have a DC show on.
Everybody at the CW went, "Thank you, Sci-Fi."
Mm-hmm.
And Sci-Fi went,
Zombie
"This
plus
is cheaper to
Supernatural."
produce."
Yeah.
Sci-Fi
And
just
the
went,
Canadian
it's
film
easier
industry
for us
went,
to get
"Yay, we
wrestling.
have jobs."
And didn't Sci-Fi not too long ago, I want to say within the last year or so, didn't they promise us that they were going to go back to their roots and do actual science fiction?
They have, and then they brought The Expanse, and they brought The Magicians.
And what was the one set in St. Louis?
Oh, Defiance. And Channel Zero just started up. So they're getting towards it.
Dominion.
But scripted TV is a lot more expensive to
Oh,
produce.
absolutely.
And
But
is a lot more time consuming
And-
to
and
produce.
Son,
But they're working on it and they're
Son,
getting
you
there.
said about the wrestling, but I've got to tell you, they were paid huge money to air the wrestling, which they then put into the shows that they're doing now. And don't forget, their own Sci-Fi is owned by NBC. So.
Oh, I'm not knocking it. I just think it's utterly hilarious that it's like, we're the Sci-Fi Channel. Let's show wrestling.
And you know, I nobody is more aware than I am that scripted television 1-hour dramas are incredibly expensive to produce, especially when you get into things like science fiction and fantasy. But I'm just kind of thinking at that point, then don't you need to change the name of your channel? Put on what you want. Do whatever programming
But
you
no, hold on.
want.
It's not.
though.
It's
That's
not
why they went to
SCIFI.
SYFY.
Exactly. It's not SCIFI. It's SCIFI.
All right,
But still, I don't understand why if I want to watch, Star Trek: The Next Generation in the middle of the afternoon on a
BBC
Tuesday,
America.
I'm putting on BBC America instead of the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah, that's really odd. Now, I really hate to cut people off, but we're starting to get towards the end of the hour.
If you guys want to come back later, we'd
Yeah.
love it, because this has been maybe the most intelligent hour that we've had in the
Yeah.
7.5
Yeah,
hours.
this has been so And likely awesome. The most intelligent hour we will have.
I do want
That's
to point
not
out.
true. We've got Fark. All right, you're right.
All right.
No, you're right.
Okay.
So,
before
really
we
quick, can I just mention
Yes,
one
please.
more ridiculous test that is
Yes, please.
kind of Tumblr? And this is the Furiosa test. Of course, based on Mad Max, and a film passes the Furiosa test if it makes misogynists boycott it.
Did you
I like it.
just use
What?
Tumblr as an adjective?
Did I? I don't
Sounded
know.
like it, unless I misheard.
It sounded like you said this test is kind of Tumblr.
Oh, it came from Tumblr.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah,
looking
it was-
around. I'm going to look around the studio right now. Everyone that was stunned and shocked by Fury Road, raise your hands. Yeah, it looks like it's unanimous.
Oh, hell yes.
Did
All
not.
right.
It blew me. I thought it was
I
going to be
haven't
all
seen
Tom
it.
Hardy, and I was very happy with what we got. Not that I'm against Tom Hardy. Believe me, if I was gay.
All right.
Except in Nemesis.
Before we,
I even liked him in that.
Okay. Before we end the hour, I do want to point out we have raised over $1,000 for
Stop
stuff.
it.
Woo!
Isn't that
Oh,
awesome?
Terry,
And-
Mike has some info for me.
And I know that Nick's gonna be under the table pretty soon. Mike, take it away.
This last hour, courtesy of our next guests, actually. So I want to personally thank Dan and Bill from Trek Geeks. They each donated $100.
Oh my
you
God,
guys are
you
totally
guys.
awesome.
Don't bribe the judge.
Hold on, I got four
Don't
to
bribe
do
the
now.
judge. Totally bribe the judge.
I have 4 to
Bribe
do
the
now.
judge.
Hold on. Here we go. Here's
should
one.
Should we make them split the prices?
Yes.
I'm willing to
Here comes
to
number
send
2.
out 2 copies. By the way, I am.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah.
Oh fuck.
Well, before
Here comes
everybody
number
goes.
3.
Oh God, you're doing
Oh
3?
man.
He's got 4
Gee,
shots
You
to
only
do.
needed 2, but
Here's the 4th.
Oh.
Nick, do we need to call someone for alcohol poisoning?
Jerry, you're so pretty.
I know.
Yay, Jara.
I didn't know we were supposed to be drunk.
No, every time there's a donation of $50 or more, I have to take a shot.
He just decided to do 4 because 2 people donated
Did
100,
each.
and it was Bill
Oh,
and Dan.
I see.
So I want to say thank you to
Thank
the
you
lovely ladies.
so much.
Oh,
Janet,
this
take
was
it
wonderful.
away.
This was fantastic. Thank you so much. Certainly, we would love to continue this conversation either later in the 24 hours, or if you want to come on to Semantic Shenanigans and talk with us, to speak for Shanna, I would
I'd love to have them on. This was great.
It
Hell
was
yeah.
great talking with you guys too.
And you guys are always welcome with us. You know that it's always fun when you guys are on, and always very enlightening.
Well, all you need to do is tell me when you want me on, and I'll come on.
Thank you,
Talking
Mike.
to you. You got an open door.
All right. Well,
Aw.
Bill and Dan, you're the big winners of the hour.
Big wieners.
Big wieners. You're the big wieners of the hour. And although I don't think you got to hear, there is a wonderful prize pack that we'll have you guys split. But Miss Janet has graciously donated a second copy of her book, Untrustworthy.
Where can we hear Women at Warp now?
Yes, please.
Womenatwarp.com.
Yeah, womenatwarp.com. And, search us on iTunes, and we're available the usual places. You can also find us on Facebook or Twitter at Women at Warp.
We love you guys.
I was going to say what I normally say, we've been pimping shows, but we've been pushing for your show for a long time. So
anything we can do.
I don't want to get kicked next time I see Jara.
Well, because I would kick you. Because I do.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the support.
We love you guys so
ladies.
much.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks, guys.
Keep intelligent talk on the air. Thank you.
Yes.
We're going to take a break now and then come back with Trek Geeks, and they're
Mikey.
just two talking
The
monkeys.
trial of the century.
The trial.
Yes. But before we go,
Yes.
just to let you guys know, so it's the Untrustworthy book. It's the Longest Night Watch. It's let's see, the homemade Delta pillow that
Lori
had
Ferris made.
So, and then also the Okuda stickers. So, Trek Geeks, they're gonna have to fight over those.
We can also donate one of the lovely. Actually, why don't we donate both? We'll give one to Dan and one to Bill, and that's going to be the signed movie posters of Yesterday Was a Lie, signed by Kipley Brown and James Kerwin.
Okay, so we'll include both of those.
Yep. And again, thank you to Women at Warp. And I just want to say, I know the judge is getting ready. She's putting on her robe.
Judge Janet decides.
But Shanna, please stay with us if you can.
I really can't. My colleague is my neighbor, and it's board game night at her house. And I have 2 packages of cupcakes that if I don't take over, I'm going to have to eat them myself, and that's just not a good thing.
Thoroughly understood.
Bring them here. We'll eat them together.
Hell yeah.
Oh,
Thank
I've got
you,
a big
Shanna.
cupcake to bring you, Nick.
Please, everybody, listen to the new Semantic Shenanigans, the new podcast featuring our lovely Shanna and Miss Janet, talking about all things. Where what are you saying? What's your tagline? Where fandom and
law, society, scholarship, and fandom collide.
There you
and
go.
that's Judge Janet if you're nasty.
And I just want to say this about Shanna, okay? Back in the day, when things were at their darkest, she was one of those people that would be talking to me at 3 a.m. And I love her to death. And she's very well. Shanna, you and I have talked, and you know how I feel about you.
There
well,
you go.
You know what? My ringer's still on for you. How about that?
Thank you. And my cock. Never mind.
Never mind.
Oh.
Hi-oh. All right, Mike. Do you have anything before we go? Do we have to do it? Do we have to do the music and everything?
Well, I mean, personally, I need a break, but I think we should restart just for good measure.
We're going to restart. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be right back with the trial of the century, 5-year mission versus Trek Geeks.
Is 5-year mission here?
We don't know.
Yes.
Music for
Thank
the
you.
GNT show
We'll be right back.
is provided by 5-Year Mission, Enterprise Blues Band, Warp 11, Andrew Allen, and Rathor. The GNT show is a BLB production.